And I just want to remind us what happened last week because it's important about what we're hearing today. Last week, Jesus and his disciples had just come south to Jerusalem. Most of the disciples had never been there before. And Jerusalem was obviously the center of religious faith. At the center of that was the great temple. The great temple that a remnant still exists. It's called the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. So they must have been awestruck by this magnificent edifice that had been built to the glory of God. And all good Jews would have made the trek or pilgrimage at some point to Jerusalem. So when they arrived, Jesus sort of sat back with his disciples and they were watching what was happening. Part of the tradition was that you would come and you would bring a token. You would bring a gift of money or a part of your asset and give it to the temple as a sign of faithfulness. And in last week's reading, Jesus sat and watched the religious elite and the bureaucrats and the politicians and all the important people come and give of their abundance, but just a pittance of what they were actually worth. And Jesus reflected on the hypocrisy of those people. And in came a widow without a husband and without a son who was then a non-person. And she gave everything she had. She gave 2 pennies. And Jesus said, out of her abundance, she will receive the kingdom of God. That it was the faithfulness of her heart, her commitment, her acknowledgement of who she was and whose she was as a child of God. So fast forward to this week, and Jesus is now leaving the temple. And you can almost see Jesus leaving, and all the disciples are going, ooh, ah, look at the stones, look at how majestic this building is. Isn't this incredible? And then Jesus says, not one stone will be left here upon another, all will be thrown down. Well, you can just imagine their confusion. Like, what is he speaking of? What is he talking about? And he goes on to warn them that there will be tumult and war and insurrection and difficulties and challenges. For nation will rise up against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. Jesus isn't telling us anything we don't know. It has ever been thus. It has ever been thus that we as a human family on this planet have experienced insurrections and war and hostility and anger and evil one to the other. And nature herself will be calamitous and there will be disasters and terrible things always going on. But Jesus says, but this is just the beginning of the birth pangs. Now, we kind of don't get what that means because we are so enthralled with just everything else that we are creating and building for ourselves. You see, we suffer from what I call the idolatry of grandeur. The idolatry of grandeur. We get caught up in the bigger the better. The greatness, the majesty of it all. And of all the institutions on the planet, the church is just as bad as the next one. I was in St. Peter's Basilica this summer. It is awe-inspiring. I've spent time at many cathedrals in Britain, Westminster Abbey, St. Paul's Cathedral, the awesome nature of these places that have been built to the glory of God. I have been at the Cathedral St. John the Divine in New York City, the largest Gothic cathedral in the world, where they actually bring in elephants and giraffes on St. Francis Day. It has been under construction for 120 years. And we celebrate the grandeur of our church. And yet Jesus warns us that it is only but temporary. All things are temporal, temporary, finite. But that doesn't stop my capacity as a human being to seek, to achieve, to live the grandeur that I must expect upon myself, because if I work hard, I will be rewarded for it. When I was first ordained as a priest many years ago, I was a curate, which is a curia, that is means the caregiver of souls at St. Jude's Church, downtown Oakville. And when you are a new curate, the expectation is that you spent 2 or 3 years being trained by a clergy person. And then after your time there, then you move on to the next level, which would be probably a small country, rural, family parish out in the middle of nowhere somewhere. And you would put in your time of 3 or 4 or 5 years in there, and then the expectation would be once you've left the family parish, then you go to a middle-sized parish sort of in the suburbs somewhere. And you work really hard and you minister faithfully, and then after you've done your 5 or 7 years there, then you move to a large parish like a St. Jude's or St. Luke's in Burlington or St. Christopher's, or if you're really lucky, you become the dean of the cathedral. And then you spend 10 years as the dean of the cathedral, and if you're really lucky and work really hard and faithfully, you might even become a bishop. God forbid. And then if you're a really successful bishop and you do great things and people notice you and people are taken by your ministry, then you might even become an archbishop. Wow. We've made it. We've made it. But that's part of who we are as humans. We seek to find a sense of purpose in those things that are temporal. All things are finite. Nothing remains the same. Knowledge changes. Life changes. We evolve, we change, and unfortunately no stone will be left one upon the other. There will be tumult and wars and famines and earthquakes. Everything will be lost. Everything will end. But do not fear, for the birth pangs, the new birth pangs are here. You see, in our scriptural literature, there's something called apocalyptic literature. That's a big fancy word for the whole understanding that as children of God on this planet, we will not ever see God until those things that we understand and know are no longer. Things will end. Our relationships may end. Our work life may end. Our lives ultimately will end. But if we remain faithful to God, we need to understand there's an optimism and a hope that is born out of understanding that our gift of life is just that, is a gift to be utilized so that all may celebrate this gift of life. In our first reading this morning, it references the gospel reading. And in the last paragraphs, it says, temples shall fall stone upon stone, rubble and dust, all human pride. But watch through the dust, watch through the dust storms, because in it there is dawn. When the end comes, you will know your God. In the travails, in the strife, in the wars, in the famines, in the earthquakes, through the dust of discontent and uncertainty, the light and the hope of God is revealed in the person of Jesus Christ. And we give thanks to that and are called to keep our eyes and understanding that God never abandons us. Thanks be to God. Amen.